Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Jason Lehman. I'm the marketing team lead here at Fishbowl Solutions, and this is our next WebCenter Tips and Tricks webinar, where we're going to be talking about using the Oracle WebCenter Content UI and enterprise libraries. Happy to be joined by my colleague today, Jerry Aber. Welcome, Jerry.
Good afternoon, Jason.
And as we look at the agenda for today's presentation, we'll start off by talking a little bit about who Fishbowl is, what we do, how we do it, why we're different, get into the purpose of this webinar, why we picked this topic, some of those challenges that probably aren't going to be new to any of you, but as we talk to more and more customers over the years, what we're talking about today on the Content UI and the enterprise libraries, it might be an underutilized capability within WebCenter that you can start using and get more benefits from your WebCenter investment. So we're going to take a look at what makes up kind of that new WebCenter user interaction using libraries, the Content UI, the Content Desktop, or what you probably are familiar with, Desktop Integration Suite, and then kind of laying that foundation. I'll turn it over to Jerry for a demo, kind of going through each one of those pieces. So most of you hopefully know who Fishbowl is and what we do. We've been working with Oracle Web Center for about 20 years now, really helping companies focus on managing the content that drives processes within their organization. So more recently, we've been working with some of Oracle's cloud solutions. That includes Oracle Content and Experience Cloud, helping companies develop more omni-channel experiences for their digital content, marketing type assets, marketing websites, mini intranets, if you will, as well as developing digital assistants, or what probably most of you know as chatbots. So chatbots, digital assistants for customer service, employee service, so on and so forth, as well as mobile applications. And then to really help you find all that content in your organization, we leverage both on-premise search solutions from Mindbreeze and cloud solutions from Google. As far as why we're here today, the purpose of today's webinar is we want to recap some of WebCenter's capabilities. And again, these should not be new to any of you. If you've been following along kind of the release cycle and train of WebCenter dating back to about 2013-14, a lot of these capabilities, are somewhat old in that sense when you consider the years. But just as a refresher, ways that you can start using them and the benefits that you might see if you get your users interact with the content in that manner. So Jerry, during the demo, is going to show you how to configure and use enterprise libraries and discuss the various discuss some sample use cases. These use cases have come up with other customers that we've helped work with and start leveraging enterprise libraries and the Content UI. Jerry's also going to share one of the solutions that we've had to kind of integrate with this process to make it easy for you to interact and then edit content that's already in WebCenter using familiar Microsoft Office applications. Some of the challenges we've seen over the years with WebCenter, I think it again should come as no surprise that still a lot of complaints regarding the native UI, helping users navigate how the content gets displayed, the process for document check-ins, and we talk to a lot of customers, frankly, who say they're kind of stuck in that individual and departmental use case. They want to move more to an enterprise use case. So for customers on the call today, and again, thank you for answering the poll. It looks like there's some customers on the call today that are running older versions of WebCenter. So you might be familiar if you're using enterprise libraries with those older versions and the folders G kind of folder structure. You might have seen that if you were using those and you're using them a lot, you might have a bloated folder structure that has degraded your performance. And then the limited integrations with Microsoft Office. So again, Oracle has made a lot of improvements with exposing ways to interact with content, get content in the system, either through Windows Explorer or through Microsoft Office applications. So when I say limited, that's not to say that there's not some there. We're going to show you with one of our solutions today how to more edit kind of in context within WebCenter some of that Office content. So again, some of the improvements that we're going to be discussing and showing you today, the WebCenter Content UI. So this is really a more modern and mobile-ready interface. It was actually designed using more standard web type development, and it really focuses on that how to make it as easy as possible for users to search, browse, and access content. And then with the content desktop, so that's the old desktop integration suite, it's really integrating how to get to your content, get content into the system and access it using the desktop. The framework folders, that's again moving from folders G to framework folders. That again happened a while ago, but this is another part of, as you're considering moving from older versions to WebCenter, just be aware that you'll have this new frameworks folders, which provides that hierarchical folder interface. And I mentioned the solution that we developed, so this is something that we'll be talking about today and showing you is the Office Online Server Connector. So again, hopefully all of you have seen this, well, I shouldn't say new, the Content UI. Again, this has been available for about 7 years now. And really the reason it was developed is really to give users faster access to content, and that is because it's kind of architected using a single page application, which has a lot to do with how content gets loaded in the browser. As far as more compelling, it's just, again, going back to the user, what they wanted to see from an interface, make it easy for them to search for the content, browse content, filter content, and then access content. And with the Content UI, there's new features. So there's a document viewer, and you can also annotate. So that's one piece of our story today. The other piece is the enterprise libraries, and again, this is not new either. So looking back at old legacy versions of WebCenter, we still have a lot of customers utilizing these in those legacy versions. And so just so for people that don't know what enterprise library is, it really provides that top level organization for your content. So you name a library, it could be, as shown in the screenshot, a motorcycle, and then you create folders for different brands of motorcycles. What Jerry's going to show you today is kind of that comparison between the WebCenter content interface and the native, more the 11G interface, and the different ways to utilize the folders, how to configure them, so on and so forth. The big thing is really, as I've been talking about, is how to use enterprise libraries to make it easier for users to get to their content. And so again, not to oversimplify it, but basically there's a new way to search. So in the Content UI, it provides a different way to search. And then if you've created folders, you can browse those folders to get to that content and the subfolders underneath. And then once you do that, the content with an image preview gets displayed with some metadata values in the viewer. So again, just a different way that, again, as we talk to customers, makes it easier for users to get to their content. Desktop Integration Suite, again, many customers utilize this, have been utilizing it for many years, all the way back to legacy versions of WebCenter. Again, for those that aren't using it, this is a way to expose content management, get content into WebCenter using familiar channels or familiar click streams like your Windows Explorer, or embedding a toolbar right within Office applications like Microsoft Word. So really, this is what users, in context of an application or the way they're working, they want to bypass, the check-in forms and just basically work to get the content into the system as quickly as possible. Framework folders, again, I'm not going to go into a lot of technical details here, but again, that's with the with any version post 11.118, move to framework folders. Again, this is a way to organize, locate, and manage your content within WebCenter. So the big improvement here is just the overall performance. So there was a limitation in folders G with the amount of folders you could create, and the more and more folders that you would create, it would seem that we would hear from customers that their performance would be degraded. So other things that have been added now too is some more robust metadata capabilities to expose metadata within those folders. And then lastly, we released this in 2019. This is Fishbowl's Office Online Server Connector. Now this piece is really about once I have content into the system, so either through content desktop or familiar ways to get check in content to the system, users were asking for ways to, right what I'm in WebCenter or right within the browser, enable me to edit my Office content and then have that content be checked in. So I don't have to have the content downloaded, saved, and then go through that standard check-in process again. So this is just another piece that Jerry will share in kind of our story of getting content into the system, finding that content, interacting with that content, and sharing that content. So with that, I'm going to move to a demo. Jerry's going to be demoing for us today kind of that configuration and use. And as he shares his screen, he's going to go through kind of that comparison of the enterprise UI with the content UI, how to configure enterprise libraries, what's kind of available, as well as discuss some use cases for you.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Jason. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. I've transitioned from the deck, and you'll be seeing my browser page. So we're going to start off with the native UI. So I'm going to use some terms that hopefully are familiar with everybody else. So the native legacy UI is the UI you're looking at now. We're also going to see what was commonly called the ADF UI, it's now called the WebCenter Content UI. And I'll start out there and we'll show you some of the deltas as we get there, and we'll jump into a little bit on the content desktop and desktop integration suite piece. When you're working with folders and enterprise libraries, basic underpinnings of that are using the framework folders, or previously known as folders G. As a part of that out-of-the-box configuration for WebCenter, you get a starting point root library of enterprise libraries. So enterprise libraries are defined as this robust way to secure and manage and share content throughout the organization. So many people use WebCenter for departmental scenarios. If you want to consider kind of I'm going to put a thought in your head here about considering a mini intranet, documents you might want to share from different areas of the organization that people need access to that are templates, so they need to download, need to fill them out, and they maybe need to submit them into your organization. Without having to build a site, without having to build any custom development, I'm just going to use the basic enterprise library concept. So in this case, I've created 3 enterprise libraries: a general knowledge base, a human resources one, and an information technology one. Usually places where people might want to go to look up stuff that is enterprise-wide. Different people can access and manage these, so the standard content service security model applies to all content, whether they're in folders or not in folders. So your security model is intact in that scenario. From a navigation perspective, when you're in enterprise libraries, you have the full, depending on your access level, I'm in here as an admin, you're going to see many things across the top, but you'll see options for viewing and searching within the libraries. So it's just another way of searching. One thing that's kind of cool I'd like to call out is when you're looking at the folder pane up here and you have content that might be within that root file, you will see either all published items or all items. And the difference is you're seeing stuff that might be in workflow that's associated with one of those folders, libraries, or subfolders. So it's kind of cool to see that, provided you have security access to see them. Another mechanism is being able to search. So you can search in folders and folder metadata or search for files. So there is an action option across for each one of these enterprise libraries that give you access to update the folder information. Now there's ways of setting up folder metadata and folder default information in terms of security or access lists. And there's also ways of subscribing. So I've subscribed to each one of these. So every time something changes within one of those libraries, I will get a notification. For example, if I'm part of a knowledge base or a subset folder of knowledge base information for, say, a region of my business, whether it's Americas, Asia Pac, or EMEA, I can subscribe to that, and every time something changes, I will get a notification. So that helps me stay informed through a normal email without anybody having to publish something to me. The navigation also lets you kind of run back this way to get back to the root if you don't want to go back to the browse drop-down option. There's also the standard set of options as you move stuff around, and you might want to, provide you have the privileges to move stuff around, is rename them, move them from one folder to another, create a shortcut, or even add it to my folders. One thing many people forget is there's a My Content Server portion of this, that if you are using the legacy UI, that I can add the general knowledge base to my shortcuts and navigate to my folders and see that I now have access to the general knowledge base. So if I want to hit my folder to start off with, and that's why after I log in, that's where I start off with, I can jump right over to the general knowledge base and drill in to folders that have content or subfolders that might have more content that I might need to be working with. So that's a nice little feature that some people tend to forget. So as I'm working with some of my enterprise libraries, I might want to perform some functions around those. But if I am selecting stuff and drilling down, I can also do things within that folder. So now that I'm down into one of my enterprise libraries, I still have access to view all published items or all items. I can now add new folders, new query folder, retention folders, or new content items, or existing content items, and bring them into the folder. Under the covers, basically folders are just another metadata tagging option that happens as a part of the user experience. And I can continue my search. So when I do, I can add new folders and I can create some subfolders within this structure. But once I'm into one of these, I can also perform additional functions on the folders. And this is where the whole framework folders concept comes into play, and the features in terms of the folder information, the metadata values, any default metadata values, which in my case, I've defaulted certain profiles to that experience so that when I work with content, adding it, updating it, I will work with it in that profile. And I can define this folder metadata default so that when my content gets added, I will automatically be asked based on that profile configuration. So this is what you're used to if you come over here and do a new check-in, because it's happening as part of my first level of categorization, which is the folder I'm selecting to put this into. So now I'm putting structure around my content, which is ECM 101. So propagating, just a quick note about that. I can take and propagate any information I might have changed at that folder level and push it down to subfolders and or documents that might be in that folder to help update the metadata. We do that with some tool. One of our tools called Subscription Notifier, but you can also use it if you're using a folder structure to update metadata for everything below where you're making that propagation initiated. So that's kind of the quick navigation for some of these. One thing you need to be aware of when you're working with the folders and enterprise libraries is you're viewing it not just in the web viewable form, which is what you get out of the box when you do a search and the search results. The content ID will give you the web viewable. The file name is the file name you uploaded, the actual name of that document you checked in. And the title, in many cases, if you don't supply a title when you do an ad, it'll default to the file name. And then the action buttons are available to you at that point in time. So everything's still the same in terms of working with it from the normal out-of-the-box content info page and check-in profiles. So one of the scenarios that is kind of useful is from a getting benefits and forms. So if I'm getting a benefits template from say my HR library and benefits information, I might want to upload that and give somebody access and download a filter form to submit them. So one of the integration points that Jason mentioned earlier was the Office Online Server connector. So when you see this option, you see one of those Microsoft icons, you can actually click on that, and provided based on your security level, you can either change that, update that, or just view it and edit it in the browser. So you don't have to check that out, like to check out and open. There's also features that would be set up for a different time that we can talk about later. Is you can set up templates with the Office Online Server and treat that as your template to drive that experience so somebody can fill out the form like a fillable PDF scenario, fill the document, and check that in. So once I might download one of those forms, I might go and submit that form. So in this case, the use case would be I've downloaded my template and I want to upload it so I can trigger the form to be actioned by somebody in the organization. So I would basically do a new content item and check that item in. I pre-populated some comments and the draft progress, and I'm not going to do any default workflow on this, but I will pick up WebLogic, who I'm logged in as, and I'll choose the file I want to upload with. And so I'm going to pick that for Dave Smith, and I'm just going to check that in. I'm not going to put the title up there. Oh, excuse me, I will put the title up in this case. And I'll check that item in with the workflow. I'll pick a review date because I just happen to want to review this, say, a couple of weeks from now or whatever. And then I get my normal confirmation page. When that item gets checked in, because of the profile that's been assigned, I don't see the upload that I just did. It will go through its normal conversion process. And in this case, I am viewing all items as my default. So I'm seeing it even though it is in workflow. If I just look for published items, that will not show up. So I can kind of treat it like a queuing mechanism in combination with other features in WebCenter. So in order to give you some contrast in terms of working with enterprise libraries, I'm going to go into what's called the WebCenter Content and log in with the same user, except now I'm using this fancier UI. And I defaulted this UI to hit the enterprise libraries. So I can change my profile definition to default to that, or I can do a normal search. So I can do searches, browse through the libraries, and I can browse through two different options for my libraries. Either the libraries that are system or the enterprise libraries that are defined by me, or I can just look at the root folders, because I might be using framework folders to manage my content as well, and enterprise libraries shows up as one of those. And you get the navigation off to the left, so you can jump in rather quickly to see what's going on. And here's the form that I checked in. And your experience is more like kind of a mini intranet where it's got a fancier UI, it's got some different exposed features as a result of making that work. And you can kind of do some different things because here's the workflow item for that Dave Smith that I need to work since it's for me to work. And I can also pin different views to move around to different folders. So I can pin a link, or I can go to my favorites. I've favorited where I submit my forms through this process of this experience. When I do this, I can also upload with my normal profiles that are defined for me that I have access to in this content server. In this case, I'm going to use my demo profile, and I'm just going to drag and drop some file off of this list. I'm going to move it off a little bit here. And I will take another one for Jane Doe and drop that over here. So I can do a drag and drop, and I can set my metadata. One of the differences of this experience is I don't have to fill in the title, because this experience says, because I'm doing it this way, I'm going to default the title name to the file name that I uploaded. Then I can pick a review date. And if you have any processes that give you some periodic reviews, you can make that happen. So that will submit that. Now we'll actually check the workflow and go through the conversion process as well. The thumbnail won't be shown until it gets through the conversion process and you refresh the page to make that happen. So you can see the latest and greatest version that came in there. So that's a way to kind of work through this process and actually look at different types of libraries. Navigation's a little bit different. So I can drill into some of those and see what's going on in other portions of my enterprise folders. You can change those views as well. See the thumbnail view, see the tabular view, and it keeps that information for me as I navigate through the site. So I'm going to jump back to, but as I'm working through some of my experiences, there's many things I can do to kind of expose how this experience works through the out-of-the-box content server features. When you're viewing assets through this model as well, you're actually looking at the file name that was uploaded. And when you're viewing documents in this viewer, you're seeing it with the new review pane. And I will see multiple revisions across the top if there are multiple revisions, but I will see a preview pane off the left of the document and I can page through, and I can start annotating as part of that process. And I can work with the native, the web viewable, see the metadata, update the metadata, provided I have the right security, and see the security that's applied to it. And more features allow you to do the usual stuff you're used to working with than the native legacy UI. So just a kind of a quick snapshot of how that UI works. One of the things I do want to show also is the desktop integration, also known as Content Desktop. And I have several content servers attached to my desktop integration suite UI. The one I was using was called Show Me. And when I do browse content, I will have that same experience of the folder view, except I'm using it in something I'm going to be more familiar with than my network file shares. Enterprise libraries, it still has the same enterprise libraries, and I still see stuff that is formatted and organized in that content. And I can use the different views that Explorer allows me to work with. Now you'll notice that when I look at the submit folders, I'm not seeing anything that's been released. So this experience is going to be a little bit different than the experience that you're seeing with the UIs that we went through. But documents will be available to me, and when I'm working with documents in this fashion, I also have capability to look at them, edit them, and so forth, and it does the download, and it'll open them in native and allow me to put those back in. In this experience, the Office Online connector does not play a role. It's more from a time perspective of the UI and allows me to kind of work with the same features in a similar fashion that I'm used to prior to putting in the content server. If I wanted to update metadata, the profile that happens to be assigned to this type of folder, this type of document will be used to pop up the option for me to update any metadata related to this document. So different ways of just kind of getting at that access, but I think that this mini intranet concept is one that's underutilized for customers who don't have full intranets or have link farms, but they do want to share documents in an easy, non-developmental situation. So it gets it out there quick and clean and follows the normal content service security and configuration practices that you already have in your environment. All right, Jace?
Thanks, Jerry. That was great. We've seen that customers that have moved to this Content UI, WebCenter Content UI, got off the legacy UI, that increased the value that they saw and also helped them increase adoption. And then over time, it exposed, as Jerry just demoed, new ways to interact and get to content using desktop and the old desktop integration suite, or what's called WebCenter Content Desktop today. And then this libraries capability, again, not new, but as you should have seen in the demo, as Jerry compared the old way to interact and create libraries with legacy UI to how it looks today from the WebCenter Content UI, much more interactive, much more modern looking, and really that simple flow of search for content, browse content through folders and subfolders, and then view your content in the right with that new added feature of the viewer that's exposed in the Content UI. So just to summarize here, again, we realize these components, these capabilities are not new, but we still feel they're underutilized. So if you're not using them today, definitely feel like there's use cases where you can find some value with the content that you're being managed within your organization. As you think about those use cases, that can really help you roll these out throughout your enterprise. At the enterprise level, some of maybe the HR content that you're managing or the finance content you're managing, and then obviously consider your departmental use cases well down from there. And then once content's in, how do you get your users to make sure that they're updating that content and make them really easy to do that instead of having to go through the long checkout and in process. So Jerry showed through Fishbowl's Office Online Server Connector a little bit how you're able to expose that. So we do have a few questions. The first question, Jerry, right off the top is someone asked about this. For the new Content UI, that's an enabled component. So you just have to enable it. It comes with it. You just have to enable it, correct?
That's correct. Yep, workflow is enabled with that out of the box. Same way workflow you would use if you use the native UI or the WebCenter Content UI. Everything will jump into workflow and be treated just as another document would be treated.
Another question about our document editing product or Office Online Server Connector. So once an editing session begins within the browser, that content gets checked out. So if that content is part of a workflow, once you're done with your editing session and you close out, that content gets checked back in and can go into a workflow.
Because it supports multiple people editing at the same time, when the last person gets out, it will trigger that activity. Kevin's got a couple. So yes, if there are any limitations with the Content UI, for example, workflows, and no, there are no limitations to that. It actually works a little cleaner and neater out of that UI. And is the Content UI its own managed server? And yes, the answer to that is yes, it is its own managed server, very easy to set up and install. Any file limitations with Desktop Integration Suite? No, but there's only whatever the limitation would be on the content server. So normally, we have a component that kind of prevents very, very large files or customers who don't want to have large files checked in, enabled on the content server so we could protect against that, and the customer can then set the limit of the file that's going to be uploaded. Another question here, is the Content UI custom like the native UI? Unfortunately, that is not the case. It is an ADF app that we cannot customize. That's why we spend a lot of time doing some other things with portals to bring that type of experience up to a more open experience in terms of what you want to have to show that content. You can find it with other things. There's one thing interesting to note about enterprise folders is when you use WebCenter Portal out of the box and use some of its content contribution features, it uses enterprise libraries to segment that content by what's called, used to be called spaces, now they're called portable or just portals. So the statement here about the last customization I saw was just some custom skins and the Content UI as many customizations as possible. So like I said, you cannot customize that UI, but you can kind of abstract that back end to different types of front-end UIs or change the out-of-the-box UI and put your own little site kind of skin on top of that.
Yeah, hopefully we maybe reintroduced you or just refresh your memory that these capabilities are out there with WebCenter, and as you consider more use cases for WebCenter, how enterprise libraries can be used. Maybe you want to move to the Content UI and implement Content Desktop for those new ways to interact and get content into the system. And then once that content's in the system, another way that you can expose to your users so that they can edit it right in the browser, right in context of WebCenter. And that was Fishbowl's Office Online Server Connector. So we hope everyone has a great day. Jerry, thank you so much for the demo. Nice job.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for attending, everybody.
And we will talk to you more down the road. Thanks, everyone.